Welcome to TV, Tennessee Valley Church. We're here again on this Galilean mountainside, near where Jesus proclaimed the words we've been considering these weeks, the Beatitudes. Today is our last day in this series. Jesus used more words to describe this final blessing and seemed more intent to describe this one than any of the others. To this point, what Jesus said was countercultural and counterintuitive. Blessed are the meek, for example, and blessed are those who mourn. But now he drops a beatitudinal bombshell. Blessed are those who are persecuted. The Beatitudes, to this point, make us feel like if I follow Jesus, I'll be out of step with the world. This final beatitude makes us feel like if I follow Jesus, I might get my head chopped off. By the time this mountainside sermon of Jesus circulated widely, the early Christians who read these words of Jesus already were experiencing persecution. John the Baptist had been beheaded. Stephen had been stoned. The Christians in Jerusalem had scattered because of their severe persecution. Within a few decades, Nero would be tying Christians to posts, painting them with tar and lighting them as human torches in Rome. The crowds at the Colosseum would cheer for the lions as the Christians were thrown to the angry beasts for sport. In fact, the early Christians were the most thrown people in history. They were thrown out of their synagogues and out of their families. They were thrown into prisons and into fires, and of course, to the lions. To follow Jesus often results in persecution. But let me warn us early on not to use the word persecuted regarding ourselves too lightly. We followers of Jesus in the U.S. might be mocked, marginalized, and misrepresented in some media. But we won't go missing. We won't be mutilated. We won't be martyred. It feels to me like it cheapens the word persecution and trivializes the severe persecution experienced by our Christian brothers and sisters around the world to claim too quickly that we in the U.S. are persecuted. There are people in various parts of our world dying this very day because of their commitment to Jesus. I'm not talking about suicide bombers who killed their perceived enemies in the name of religion. I'm talking about peace-loving, faithful followers of Jesus who die at the hands of murderers who are so afraid of the gospel that they will kill people to keep it from spreading. According to a recent report, more than 5,600 Christians were killed for their faith last year, and more than 2,100 churches were attacked or closed. That's serious persecution. Maybe we should at least recognize that there are levels of persecution. It's true that in our country, the Christian faith is, it's sometimes lampooned in movies and on TV. Students who take what they believe to be a Christian position on a hot-button issue risk being made fun of by other students. It's true that you might be left out of some social and professional circles because of your faith. Those things and other forms of persecution are real, though not as dramatic as the persecution of our brothers and sisters in many parts of the world. I'll confess something to you. A few years ago, our church embarked on a financial campaign to build facilities for children. Carrie, my wife, and I decided to make what was, for us, an ambitious contribution to the fund. At the time, we were members of a local country club because I enjoy golf. Carrie and I decided that in order to make the contribution we believed we should to the church's financial campaign, we needed to cancel our membership at the club. It was a small sacrifice. In fact, I've often said that I'm a little afraid that in heaven I'll meet one of the early Christians or a 21st century Christian in another country who was executed because of his or her faith. And if he or she asks me what my sacrifice was, I'll be embarrassed to say, I gave up my membership at the country club. Persecution is a serious threat in many parts of our world. Let me tell you a story. Several years ago, I got a call from a gentleman in our church who, at the moment, was engaged in a conversation with a gentleman from another country. The gentleman from another country did not speak English very well, but he had attended some events at our church, and it was obvious this gentleman was trying to say in very broken English, "I want to become a Christian." So the man from our church called me and said, "Can you come quick? I have this man here who wants to become a Christian and I'm not sure what to do." I did go, and I met a man from a country where converting to the Christian faith could cost him and his family dearly. But sure enough, he could say enough in English to communicate his desire to follow Jesus. His English was extremely limited, and I know not one word in his native language, so I took out my phone and I looked up Google Translate. I would type in a phrase and Google would translate my words into my new friend's language. I was praying Google wouldn't mess up the translation. My international friend would type words in his language and Google would translate them to English. Thus, we were conversing for a half hour or so, and it was obvious this man was ready to become a follower of Jesus. I invited him to pray in his own language, suggesting some things he might want to communicate to God in his prayer. It was a surreal, wonderful experience, and the man soon wanted to be baptized, but he was afraid. If it were to become known that he had become a Christian, he would not be able to return to his home country, and his family back home could be severely persecuted because of his decision. So, 4 of us gathered in secret, the man to be baptized, 2 of our folks, and myself. In a portable baptistry, the man was baptized as a declaration of his faith and commitment. He could not do so in a public setting because of religious persecution. It's a real and dangerous thing. Before I move on, I need to issue a warning. There's a difference between persecution and legitimate criticism. As Christians, let's not be obnoxious and then blame our culture for persecuting us. Let's not reinforce the negative image of Christians like us by inappropriate, hate-filled words and actions. And when need be, let's distance ourselves from those who say and do cruel things. I'm often ashamed of the hate speech I hear from people who bear the label Christian. Take the folks from Westboro Baptist, for example. Remember them? Some of the criticism leveled at Christians, in fact, is the fault of those among us of whom I believe Jesus himself is ashamed. However, if following Jesus faithfully and lovingly results in true persecution, so be it. Living the gospel consistently carries a price. Our persecution probably will come in the form of what Jesus said in verse 11. They will insult you and say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Likewise, 1 Peter 4:14 reads, "If you are insulted because of the name of Christ, you are blessed." Our persecution as Christians will probably mean belittling, disparaging, people insulting us. And interestingly, persecution is not all bad. Ironically, persecution empowers believers and churches. 2 Corinthians 12:9 and 10 reads, "For Christ's sake I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong." The earliest Christians were a persecuted, maligned, second-class band of courageous people. But in 313 AD, Constantine became Roman emperor, declared himself a Christian, and Christianity became the favored religion of the Roman Empire. And when it became cool to be a Christian, the movement lost much of its power. And we are descendants of that culture of Christian advantages. In our land, there still are some advantages, particularly in the Bible Belt. Economically, politically, and socially, it's advantageous to identify with the church. Of course, things are changing. The church in America, even in the Bible Belt, might just be returning to the days when Christians were seriously marginalized. We might be headed back to the future, back to a day when identifying with Jesus will mean more, back to the day when the Christian faith had a vibrancy and a power in persecution that, frankly, it does not have when the cost of following Jesus is low. For it is when we are weak, when our resources are least, that God's power is likely to flow through us. A 28-year-old Christian woman from the Middle East spoke at a church in Gadsden, Meadowbrook Baptist Church, back in 2016. She was asked, how can Christians in America pray for Christians in the Middle East? The way she answered was shocking. She said, do not pray for the persecution to stop, because the church is growing when the Muslims see how we love them anyway. Instead, she said, pray that God would give us the strength and courage to endure it so that He will be glorified. When asked how the persecution was impacting the Christian church there in the Middle East, the young woman opened her Arabic Bible and read from Exodus chapter 1. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and the more they spread abroad. 2 Timothy 3:12 says, everyone who wants to live a godly life in Christ will be persecuted. So what is your persecution? When's the last time you were insulted for your faith? Honestly. Could it be that some of us aren't being persecuted because we're ashamed to be open about our faith? Let's make sure we are not too intimidated, too timid, too embarrassed, too uncomfortable to openly let people outside our circles know that our faith is in Jesus. Let's make sure we aren't ashamed of Jesus and His story. In just a few minutes, I'll be back to talk about the honor of signing up for a hazardous mission.
And as I studied Baptist history, I realized that one of the most important things that Baptists have brought to the table is religious freedom. And for over 400 years, we've believed that religious freedom, must be freedom for people of all faiths and even people of no faiths. If any group is vulnerable, then all of us are vulnerable because we could become minorities overnight.
Excellent. It's interesting. You know, there have been times over the past few years where this issue has received a lot of attention nationwide. You know, something will happen. Usually something terrible will happen. We'll hear about people that are experiencing persecution in the news. There's a call to pray and to give. and then the story is quickly replaced by something else. For someone who has their finger on the issue, briefly talk about some of the recent trends. What do we need to know?
Well, I think knowing the truth is the most important thing. So, how do you distinguish between the stories that they're true and those that may be exaggerated, or those that are not true? About 3 or 4 years ago, Wilberforce entered into a legal relationship with the Baptist World Alliance. Baptists are in 132 different countries around the world. And so the whole Wilberforce strategy is top down, bottom up. How can you affect the laws, get rid of unjust laws or unjust practices? At the same time, how do you inform the grassroots people? Well, the BWA already gives us a grassroots network. And so we don't have to just rely on news sources from around the world. We talk to our brothers and sisters in these countries of concern. We make trips there. Before we even had our offices set up in Virginia, Congressman Wolf said, if we're going to be, he said, we're going to be a do tank, not a think tank. And so he said, we need to go to Iraq. Well, that was just about 3 months after ISIS had gone through Iraq and had and just driven all of the Christians out of the Nineveh Plains. He said, we need to go to Iraq. And I said, well, is that a city in Virginia? I really wasn't excited about going to Iraq, but we did. And so 5 or 6 of us from our team stood behind sandbags with Kurdish generals a mile and a half from ISIS, because we wanted to find out from the Christians and the Yazidis and the others there who've been driven out of their homes, tell us the truth, tell us what has happened. And so 2 ways: we go and we try to engage, whether it's hiring security when we went all over the Middle Belt in northern Nigeria, places where our State Department had never been, and many of the Nigerian military had never been, or whether it's also just engaging with our Baptist brothers and sisters around the world so that they can give us first-time real experience about what they're facing.
The scale of the problem and the distance between American churches and churches experiencing persecution can make us feel like there's little that we can do to help. How do you recommend churches like ours and the people watching today get involved with this issue?
Well, first, become informed. And that's where you go to our website 21 Wilberforce, and just sign up for a free alert. So we send out an alert about every month. It'll come under my name, but this will come to you, and it will highlight 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 key events happening at that time. And so we will give you some accurate information about recently Manipur in India. It's a state in northern India. Over 80 Christians have been killed there in recent months. 50,000 people have been driven out of their homes. One of the things that we did, we worked with our seminary in northern India, and we sponsored 8 crisis counselors to go into Manipur and to go to these refugee camps. And so we pay for them to be over there for 3 months so they can meet with the women, the children, and the men who have gone through such horrible things, and just comfort them with psychological as well as Christian care. So you just sign up for the alert. Go there, sign up for the alert. You'll get that. And then bring that to the church. On Sunday mornings, pray for these people. We had the privilege of participating with some other groups to help rescue a church in China. 64 people who had fled China because of persecution. They went to South Korea, ended up in Thailand, where all of them were put in prison. And we got word on a Thursday morning from Congressman Wolf. He called me and he said, we've got to get word to Secretary Blinken today, or they're going to send these Christians back to China, where they'll be persecuted, put in prison, maybe even killed. Children would be put in re-education camps. So we mounted a campaign on that day. That was a Thursday. By God's grace, on the next Friday, I was standing there with some of our team, and even like Ambassador Hussein from the U.S. State Department, welcoming these 64 to Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. And now they're relocated in East Texas, being taken care of by churches there. So that was on Good Friday. It was a Good Friday miracle. But we put pressure on the State Department. We put pressure on members of Congress and even members of the UK Parliament and all. They weighed in and they wanted to do something, and we gave them a good excuse to do it. But Tim, that was on a Friday, Good Friday. Easter Sunday morning, Elijah Brown and I, Elijah's the General Secretary of the Baptist World Alliance, he and I were on a Zoom call with Mrs. Sampson, whose husband, Dr. Sampson, who was president of one of the Korean, one of the Baptist conventions of the Korean people in Myanmar, who that week had been sentenced to 6 years in prison. So, like you said, they're ongoing crisis. So we celebrated on a Friday a victory, and on Sunday, Easter Sunday morning, we mourned one of our Baptist brothers. But why couldn't every Baptist church in 132 countries, why couldn't we have prayed for Dr. Sampson by name on Resurrection Sunday? We've got the technology. We just have to have the willpower to get involved.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Everett, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tim. It's an honor to be with you.
What has it cost you and me lately to follow Jesus? If following Jesus involves no sacrifice, then we probably aren't following Him very closely. And if you are paying a price, be strong. You're part of a rich heritage. You're taking your place alongside people of faith through the centuries who have believed following Jesus is more important than life itself. So when they say your intellect is inferior and your opinions are obsolete, be courageous. When they say your attitudes are antiquated and your morals are mindless, be courageous. When they say your styles aren't stylish and your habits aren't hip, be courageous. When you get left out, singled out, blessed out, and cussed out, be courageous. Stand up for Jesus, the hymn says, the strife will not be long. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me, said Jesus, because great is your reward in heaven. Have you seen this? Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. That advertisement was placed in a London newspaper in 1914 by Sir Ernest Shackelford, the Arctic explorer. One would think that no one would respond to such a demanding call, but thousands did. And why would people say yes to that kind of call? For the same reason that in many parts of our world, followers of Jesus are willing to die for their faith, because people are willing to pay a great price for the sake of a cause that is greater than themselves. I'm inviting us all into that kind of commitment, that courageous, life-changing choice to follow Jesus as best we understand His teachings, no matter the price. I believe, in fact, that we cannot fully live until we have something worth really sacrificing for. And we never will know life at its best until following Jesus becomes more important than our very lives. I invite you to a courageous commitment that would enable us to say, whatever the cost, I will follow Jesus.
Let me be filled with kindness and compassion for the one for whom you love and gave your Son for humanity. Increase my love. Help me to love with open arms like you do. A love that erases all the lines and sees the truth. Oh, that when they look in my eyes, they would see you. Even in just a smile, they would feel the Father's love. Oh, how you love us. From the homeless to the famous and in between. You formed us and you made us carefully. all your children. So help me to love with open arms like you do. A love that erases all the lies and sees the truth. Oh, that when they look in my eyes, they would see you. Even in just a smile, they would feel the Father's love. Let all my life tell of who you are, and the wonder of your never-ending love. Let all my life tell of who you are. You're wonderful and such a good Father. Oh, let all my life tell of who you are, and the wonder of your never-ending love. Let all my life tell of who you are, that you're wonderful and such a good Father. Oh, that you're wonderful and such a good Father. Help me to love with open arms like you do. A love that erases all the lies and sees the truth. Oh, that when they look in my eyes, they would see you. Even in just a smile, they would feel the Father's love. Even in just a smile, they would feel the Father's love. Oh, even in just a smile, they would feel the Father's love.
Hi everyone, I'm Holly Knupp, Minister to Median Adults at First Baptist Huntsville. We are folks in our 40s and 50s, married, single, and empty nesters. We'd like to invite you to any of our in-person studies, small groups, or social events. Check out our website or email me at holly@fbchsv.org for more information. We look forward to building community and growing our faith together with you.